Weymouth in Dorset has a piece of my heart. When I was a little boy, my parents used to take me there on holiday, and some of my greatest memories from childhood involve this area of Dorset. I'm stood still on Chesil Beach. It's freezing, but what a great place to tell you a story. I used to fish with my dad, literally on that beach there, getting battered by the wind constantly. And I used to also play in the sea at Weymouth Beach, literally just over there, on an inflatable lilo. And it was here where I discovered my love for history at a place called Knopf Fort, or No Fort as it's correctly pronounced, but we still call it Knopf Fort, it probably incorrectly, and we still do 20 years on. In the same way that I fell in love with Dorset and Weymouth, one of British history's, let's say, most troubled kings did the same. And all around here, there are different references to King George III. On a royal visit, one local landowner made a huge carving into the hills just outside of Weymouth, and he made a white horse with the king riding on it. However, slightly foolishly, he carved it the wrong way round, with George III actually heading out of town rather than heading towards a seaside resort. This mistake allegedly haunted the man who made the white horse for the rest of his life. But his intentions were good. King George III is often referred to as the Mad King, and he's suffered a huge amount during his lengthy reign. Many people believe, and still do, that the coast and the seaside has almost a healing property, and that coming away to the seaside can make you feel a bit better. This was used during the First World War, for example, as soldiers were sent back to Britain, but to the seaside to recover and then recuperate. But the king was the most powerful person in the land, and was also the most famous. Yes, people didn't have access to the portraits and images that we have now, but they knew when their king was coming. However, how would the king have swam or bathed in the sea? There was a rather strange invention that was created for this, and this was known as a bathing machine. These were little sheds really, sheds on wheels in which the king would get inside of, and he then would change into his bathing costume, helped by members of the court inside of the hut. The hut had wheels attached to it, and it would then be dragged out to sea by a horse to avoid the king being seen walking down the beach or into the sea in his bathing costume. Some bathing machines do exist, and they were practically mobile changing rooms for people to use to save some of their modesty. King George III first dipped his feet into the sea at Weymouth on the 7th of July 1789, and he was accompanied by a number of lady bathing attendants. He got changed, and then as the king ducked his head in the water, a band loudly played "God Save Great George Our King," and this caused a lot of shock, surprise, and people flocked to see the king having a swim. The first bathing machine was developed years after this, and the king's machine, it was stated, was in the form of an oblong at its base, and painted white with the panels blue and red cornices, but is destitute of lining. The outside at the top forms a semicircle, on the extremity of which stands upon a pole of about 2 feet in length the crown, and on the other the British flag on a pole, or standard, about 10 feet high. On the front is painted the king's arms. After the first time that the king had swam in the sea, he came back to Weymouth and continued to use his bathing machine. A newspaper stated that the Queen, Charlotte, had also her own machine made and painted. In 1792, King George III came back to Weymouth, and his bathing experience was, let's say, more private and better because of the use of the bathing machine. He was able to have a dip in the sea, in complete privacy, and it could be used in any weather. It's not thought that George III spent too long in the water. He would have been taken out to sea, dipped in and out of the water a few times before returning back to the machine, basically the shed, to then change back into his robes. Bathing machines continued to be used long after the death of King George III, and at Weymouth they were still used in the early part of the 20th century. There was even a local bylaw which was introduced to stop them being used on a Sunday, and people began to have to pay for the use of the machine. It's strange to think that in the centuries before, the king had a dip and a splash in the same place where I, as a kid, used to play with my brother and my dad. I don't think you'd expect to see King Charles III and Queen Camilla having a swim out there anytime soon. Thanks for watching.